Yes, hello, this is Dave from cheapbooks.com, playing World of Tanks. This video is going to be about stat padding, and I'm going to explain to you how to do it. I don't personally do it, I play for fun, but other people do it, and they claim that they're better players because they have better stats, whether it's WN8 or the service record, but it's just not true. I'm going to explain to you all the tricks that they use in order to make their stats better. And this, again, it includes the WN8, getting kills, damage, etc., all the way down the line. And they're not really better players. And I'm going to show you how to identify a person who's a stat padder based on examining their account. First of all, I'm going to explain to you what WN8 is. WN8 is a statistic, and there are others. And what it does is it measures how much damage you do and how many kills you do. So what happens is, if you get more damage than other players, then you get a better ranking. If you get more kills, you get a better ranking. But the problem is that it's not equal. And the reason why, we're going to take not a premium tank. A premium tank actually makes it a little bit more equal. But let's look at another one of these tanks like this Tiger P. If you look at the guns, you can see this one has 4 guns on it. And this one does 350 damage, this one does 240 damage, this one does 220 damage, this one does 135 damage. So there's a gun that does 3 times more damage over the base gun, which is this one right here. And the penetration changes depending on which gun you use. But the problem is with WN8, it doesn't compare which gun you're using. So if you have a Tiger P and it's completely stock, and you have the stock gun with lower penetration and does lower damage, the people that have the higher WN8, they don't have the stock gun. They've got the better gun that does double the damage, does 50 more penetration, and it's just not fair. How can they say that they're a better player when really what they just have is a better gun? And the way they do this is when they get the tank, they come over here and they use their free XP. I'm going to show you how much free XP I have. I have a total of 196,000 EXP that I can convert. And I know that I only got that from playing from one weekend. So in one weekend, I was able to get 200,000 free EXP. And the reason why I did it is because when you have a premium tank or an elite tank, all of that goes into free EXP. In one day, you can get 100,000, no problem. And then you go here and you level up your gun to the best gun, and you immediately start with the best gun. So these people have an advantage, and it's a mechanical advantage. It's not a skill-based advantage. Now I'm going to talk real quick about service record. Now service record is right here, and you have a number. And I don't know if anybody really knows how it's calculated. It says here that it's a measure of player skills for victories, damage caused, spotting damage, average damage per battle, average experience, and battle survived. But here's the problem. You can see flaws right here. When you have damage caused with your assistance, the tier 10 tanks do more spotting damage than a tier 2 tank. And same with average damage per battle and average experience per battle. They just do more. So in theory, I don't know if it's per tier or not, but if it isn't, all you got to do is play tier 10 tanks and you're going to get a higher personal record. And it says, for example, battles survived. People who play SPGs or tank destroyers and they tend to hide in the back of the field, they're going to have high survival rates because the enemy just won't find them. So their personal records are going to be higher. People who play light tanks like myself, I'm always the first one spotted. I'm always the first one that the enemy shoots at. I'm always the first one that already shoots at. I'm always in the middle of the field. You watch my videos, I'm in the middle of the map. Everybody shoots at me, and I like to play. I like the challenge. I'm often the first one to die, and I still get top EXP. But it affects your service rating because it reduces how many battles you survive. So that's one way to get your personal rating. Play tier 10, play SPGs, camp in the back. I mean, that's not better skill. That's a different play style is what it is. So I've explained the two of those things, and we're going to go through so much. This is going to be a lot longer of a video. I'm going to go through everything that you can do to pad your stats. Now, when you look at a player who's a stat padder, I'm not going to point out any examples, But what you're going to notice is that they tend to play the same tanks over and over and over again. I have 120 tanks or something like that, and I play them all. I have one for every branch. This is just available in my garage right here. You can see that my garage is filled with tanks. And if you look at the number of battles I have, a lot of them I've got these tanks in my garage that I've only played 10 times. How am I supposed to have three stripes on a tank that I've played 10 times? I mean, it's just not reasonable for me to have that. But what stat patters do is they'll take a tank, like let's say I got my Yag Tiger, and they'll play the same tank over and over and over again. So they've got a tank, and they don't pick crappy tanks. The stat pattern is not going with one of these little crappy ones, like a Matilda doesn't have a good reputation even though I do well in it. But they don't take a crappy tank out and stat pad with it. They take out the powerful tanks. I'm going to give you an example of a powerful tank. We're going to go to the British tech tree, which is right here. We're going to go all the way up to tier 10, and you've got these tanks like this FV215B, whose gun does 1,750 damage per shot. And I'm playing tier 2 and I do 50 damage per shot, and these people think that they're better players because they play a better tank. It's just absolutely not true. One of the qualifications for WN8 and your service record is your average damage per game. And if you play a tank that has a powerful gun, your average damage is going to be higher than other players. But when you look at your service record, it's not a tank-by-tank comparison. So what's happening is people are playing overpowered tanks, getting these great stats, thinking that they're better players, but they're not. They just play better tanks. You can go and look at your service record, click on vehicles, and click on anything. You can click on victories, for example. You can see that I'm going to have a tank here. The M3 Light, I've got 71% victories. Is it because I'm a better player? No, it's because of the tank. If you look at the Sentinel, I've got 57%. The only thing that's changed is a tank. The victory rate is dependent on the tank. A good tank will have a higher victory rate. I've got this Defender. I've only played it 6 times. I got a 67% victory rate. Makes me sound like an amazing player. I've only played the tank 6 times. It's an overpowered tank. So very simple. You want to be a stat patter. You go to your victories. You pick your tank that has the highest win rate and play that tank. And if you start to lose and another tank becomes the highest win rate, only play your tank that has the highest number of victories, and it will make your stats go up. If you go down at the bottom, let's see one of my weaker tanks. My Leopard only got 35%. I'm not exactly sure why, but that's what the stats say. I'm not doing well with that tank. Okay, so now the other thing you have is average XP per battle. What I do, I play every tank. I'm going to show you my bottom XP. I've got a tank. Let's look at the T1E6. I hate this tank. This tank is complete garbage. My average XP per battle is 250. I still play the tank. I play it because it's a premium tank. I level up my crew. Tier 2 is very different from Tier 10. Tier 2 is a fast action tier. Games are over in 3 minutes. You got to think very quickly. Your tank isn't very good, so you have to play a little bit different. You have to be more protective of your armor. You have to aim a lot more accurately. Otherwise, you just waste shots. So you learn skills by playing in Tier 2, but you're not going to get a lot of damage, and you're not going to get a lot of EXP. So a stat pattern would never play that tier for EXP or damage. They're going to be playing up here like my IS-7, which I've only apparently played 1 battle in. I guess that's what it says. I got 100% victories. Look at my average XP, 1,116. I could keep on playing that tank and the Defender and skip all the bottom tanks, and I'm always going to have a high average EXP. You're always going to have tanks that are higher than others. The other way to do it is with your mastery badges. You'll notice that some tanks I have mastery badges and some I don't. Now let's say you want to get a mastery badge. You've got this one that's a 3rd class. Once you get the M, you can't get any higher. So some people just don't play M tanks anymore. Once they get the M mastery badge, they stop playing the tank. And what they do is they come down and they go on their list and they look for a tier 3, and they only play the lower tier the tanks with the lower class until they get it up to an M. And what happens is they end up with all these mastery badges, but it's not because they're great players. It's because they didn't play the ones that they already got the mastery badge in. They focus on the ones that they need to level up. And they're working on leveling up tanks for stats purposes. They're not focusing on playing the game for fun. So what they're doing is stat padding. Now, the next thing on the list is you play overpowered tanks. I'm going to click on average EXP, go up to the top. I'm going to give you an example. Defender is a well-known overpowered tank. Type 4 Heavy is a well-known overpowered tank. I've heard that people think that the Amx 1357F is overpowered. I'm really not that sure. WZ11 is overpowered. In terms of Tier 8, when you compare the WZ11 to the IS-6 and the 112 and the IS-3 and the WZ-111, they're all Tier 8 heavy tanks. WZ-111 is better than those other tanks. Therefore, you're going to get better games with that tank. The IS-6 and the 112 are at the bottom end of the scale. The 112 they actually buffed, so it's better now than it was before. But at one time, the 112 may have been the worst tank. And if you play that tank, you're going to have lower stats. A stat padder is not going to play those tanks. So a stat padder is not a better player. He's someone who's choosing the right tank to play. Look at this. Look at my Churchill 3. It's a Tier 5 tank. Look at my average EXP, 847. All I got to do is play that tank Tier 5, and I'm going to have amazing stats. That's an example of a tank that I play in a manner that tank is overpowered for me. I could only play the Churchill 3, get amazing stats, a good win rate, great average EXP, probably kicking ass in this tank compared to other people playing Churchills. That doesn't make me a better player. I just happen to be really good in this tank. And I know it's because it's well armored and it's got a good gun and it's got good armor for its tier. Now, another trick that people use is that when they play the game, you get a gun. It's not how many penetrations you do, and it's not how many tanks you hit. It's how much damage you do. So you get a tank that does a lot of damage. Not the Chrysler GF. This one has a reputation for not doing a lot of damage. The IS-6, I guess it's kind of moderate with the damage. So you find a tank that does a lot of damage. I'm just going to randomly pick one. Let's say we pick this tank. When you have an opponent, there's a philosophy you use when you shoot at opponents. You want to knock guns out of the game. So if a guy has 1 hit point left, he's a priority. You want to kill him, so he's out of the game. But it doesn't help your stats because kills. Okay, so kills can help your stats depending on if it's WN8 or service record. But there's people. A kill doesn't equal high damage. If you have a gun that does let's say 100 hit points of damage, and you get a kill, it's no different than if you got 1,000 hit points of damage, you get a kill. If the tank has low hit points, it doesn't. Your damage doesn't matter. But someone who plays a high damage gun that does 1,750 damage, which exists in the game, they don't get high damage by killing a tank that has 1 hit point. So they don't shoot at them. They let them stay in the game, and they look for tanks that have a full HP, and they only shoot at those tanks. So they're racking up damage. Is it good for the game? We don't know. It may be good for the game, and it may not be. There's people who will tell you it's better to shoot at the tank that has the low hit point, get it out of the game. They call it focus firing. But people who stat pad will not do that because they don't get the damage for their stats, so they just don't do it. So that's one way that you can skew your stats and stat pad. You get a high damage gun and you hit tanks that have lots of HP, which is the opposite philosophy of someone who has a strategy to win the game. Now, we've already discussed this. Another thing stat padders do is they go to their tech tree and they only play higher tier tanks. If you look at my tech tree, you're going to notice I've got a tank on every branch of the tech tree. I average between Tier 8 and Tier 9. I've got 3 Tier 10 tanks. I hate playing them. I almost never play them. A stat padder is only going to play Tier 10 tanks, tanks that do lots of damage, tanks that are overpowered. They're not going to play the crappy ones. They're going to skip the crappy Tier 10 tanks. And if you look at their tech trees, unlike mine, where, again, I've moved up all the tech trees, they're going to go up 1 branch, and that's it. And they're not even going to play the other tanks in the game. So a stat padder, when you look at their account, they're going to have Tier 10 on maybe 1 or 2 tanks where they've played thousands and thousands of games, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 games on one tank. The most I have is 600 on a premium tank, and I use it to level up the crew and make money and things like that. I don't do it to stat pad. They won't, so you've got, let's say there's 400 tanks in the game. I don't know how many there are. But we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 branches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's say there's 50 or 60 branches. They're going to play 2 branches and that's it. Tier 10, forget everything else. Same tank over and over and over again. They're stat patters. That's what you're going to see when you look at their accounts. Now, the other thing that happens is that when you play any given tank, I'm going to go back to my Tiger P, for example. I just bought this tank. And the reason why is because they changed the branch. If you go to the branch over here and you look at the Tiger P, you need the Tiger P in order to get the Tiger 1 and in order to get the Ferdinand and the VK4502 and the VK100. So they added the VK4502B branch with the Panzerkampfwagen 7. The 4502 used to head to the mouse, but it no longer does. Now it goes to the Panzerkampfwagen 7. So I had to go back and buy the Tiger P again so I could finish this branch off so I can get the Mauschen and the mouse. What does that mean? That means that I now have a Tiger P with no crew because the crew moved on to the 4502. So I got to start over again with the crew. I don't have complete equipment because I didn't purchase the equipment completely for this tank. However, I've got all the modules already researched. But I already played this tank. So now when I play this, I got to play it with a base crew again. And a stat pattern is not going to play with a 50% crew, and they're not going to play with an 80% crew. They're always going to start with a 100% crew. And because they're playing only one branch, that crew is going to have 4, 5, or 6 skills. The most skills I have on a tank is 5 skills. And the reason why is because I spent a year training my crew. Just training and training and training. All of my tanks have 4 or 5 skills per crew member. It's the exception for them to not have 4. And it's because I focused on training crew skills. A stat pattern, because they only play one branch, has 4, 5, 6 crew skills, and they're doing better than everybody else. So they're playing against people that have 50% crew, 80% crew, 1 crew skill, 2 crew skills, and that doesn't make them better players. It means that they have a better equipped tank. And it's not fair to say just because you have a higher service record, just because you have a higher WN8, that doesn't mean you're a better player. And we know that there's a lot of people that play for free. They're going to have less percentage for crew skills. They're going to have, in terms of 50, 80 to 100% the training level. They're going to have fewer crew skills. They're less likely to shoot gold ammo. They're going to have less equipment. They're not going to have the gun rammers. They're not going to have the premium ammo. They're not going to have the large first aid kit, which gives you the 15% extra protection, and the large repair kit, which gives you the extra protection. They're not going to be using food consumables. There's so many disadvantages when you compare the stat pattern against a normal average player. So now, the next thing on the list, there's people that have 3 stripes on their gun barrel. I don't have 3 stripes on any of my guns. The most I have is 2. Most of my tanks, I either have 1 stripe or I'm close to getting 1 stripe. Now, there's a way that you can cheat. It's kind of cheating is what it is, to get 3 stripes. And I'm going to tell you the ways to do it. Number 1, when a tank comes out, I'm going to use the example of the Chrysler KGF, because it was the last tank that was released. I'm going to go to the service record and I'm going to look at vehicles. I'm going to show you how to stat pad to get 3 marks on these tanks. I'm going to look for a Chrysler 3K. Let's see if we can find it. It's going to be a heavy tank. Okay, here it is. Now you can notice that I have marks of excellence. It says I'm at 7%. Why am I at 7%? I'm at 7% because I've only played 6 battles with this tank. It takes the average of the last 100 battles. So my 6 battles is being compared to 100 battles worth of other players. In order for me to get that mark, I really need to get up to 100 battles. And I've gotten the first mark at 50 battles before, so it is possible. I tend to do it with the light tanks, of course. For example, this one's at 58% with 66 battles, which means I'm close to getting my first mark without getting up to 100 battles. So what a stat padder is going to do is they're going to buy the Chrysler GF the moment that it goes for sale. They're going to play it all day long. It only takes 2 days, 1 or 2 days to get 100 battles in a tank, and they're going to get 3 marks in the first 2 days that the tank was available for sale, before other people had been buying it and playing it. I've only played it 6 times. It's been available for sale for over a month. Played 6 games. Stat pattern, 100 games, first 2 days, they get their 3 marks because other people haven't played it yet. The average damage that you need to get 3 marks is a low threshold. And because it's a low threshold, it's very easy for them to get it. Makes it look like they're a better player, but they're not. They just cheated the system. There's other ways to cheat the system. That's just an example. I'll explain later how you're going to cheat the system. And the other thing that they're going to do is when they get that tank, they're going to put in the best crew, they're going to get the best equipment, and they're going to use gold rounds. Gold rounds gives you a little bit of an advantage. It's not the big advantage people think it is, but it does give you a little bit of an advantage. Okay, the other trick that you can use is depending on the time of day or day of the week that you play or the server that you play on, you can win more often. For example, if there's more people playing, you're going to have more better people to play against. If there's fewer people playing, you might have the more dedicated players, but there's going to be fewer per game. And what happens is every morning at 6 o'clock they reset the servers. So at 6 a.m., when you get on the server, there's only 1,000 people on the server. The matchmaking is very poor. You're going to get games where it's 7 on 7, 13 on 13. You're going to get games where if you play a tier 10 tank, everybody else is going to be tier 9. When there's fewer people on the server, you have an advantage to matchmaking when you play a higher tier. So a stat patter can wait until 6 a.m., log in, play tier 10, get preferred matchmaking, or between East and West server, we know that there's 4 times as many people on the East server than on the West server, so they'll play on the West server. Or what you do is when there's a 3 times weekend, everybody's playing. And what I did, I only played with the 3 times weekend and the 5 times weekend. I don't play during the week. What I discovered is if you play during the week without the big bonuses, games are easier. Everybody lemmings, everybody is camping. People don't know how to play. You get all the new players. All the tough players play on the weekends when they get the bonuses. What does a stat patter do? Stat patter plays during the week when the games are easy. They play at 6 a.m. They play on the West Coast server that has fewer players. They get the better matchmaking. They only play tier 10. They're always top tier. If you're not playing tier 10, then 50% of your games you're not top tier. When you play tier 10, you're top tier 100% of the time. And if you're playing an op tank, overpowered tank, and you're playing tier 10, that means that you're the top tank 100% of the time. And they're not better players. They're just cheating and gaming the system in order to pad their stats. So avoid the 3 times weekends and the 5 times weekends and all those frenzy bonuses, because that's when the good players get in. Like I said, that's the only time that I play. Now, I already explained about the free EXP. So what happens is you use your free XP when you get a new tank. I'm going to use the example with the Tiger P. And before you even play one game, you go and you research all the guns and the radios and the engines and the modules, so that you've already got an advantage. When you are a regular player, you have to earn that. And to earn it means 50% of your games are going to be with the low-tier gun and the low-tier modules, and 50% of your games are going to be with the higher-tier guns. And then by the time you get to this higher-tier gun, you're ready to research the next tank. So what happens is half of your games you're playing with a stock tank and half you're playing with a better equipped tank. Stat Patter doesn't do that. Stat Patter uses the free EXP, researches all the best modules. 100% of his games he's playing with a better equipped tank than you are, and he's getting a better WN8 and he's getting a better service record, not because he's a better player, but because he's gaming the system for stats purposes. Now, the other technique that you're going to use, a lot of stat patters are campers. They sit in the back, they sit at the base, they make sure that the allies are always in front of them. They let the enemy shoot at their allies instead of getting shot at. So they avoid taking damage. If someone points a gun at them, they run and hide. Number 2, they let the allies take all the damage. Number 3, they let the allies do all the spotting. If their team is good enough to win the game, they take the win. So 50% of the time, that's going to happen. If their team is not good enough, what happens is, while their team is being pummeled by the enemy, they're hiding in the back, shooting at enemy tanks without worry of being shot at, racking up damage, and there's a lot of hit points out there. If you got a good team, it's hard for you to get damage because your teammates are doing the damage and they're knocking down the hit points of the enemy team. But when you're on a losing team, you can rack up damage. So you just sit in the back and hope that the enemy comes at you one at a time. You kill them one at a time, and then you either win the game or you get a great game, lots of kills, and you declare yourself a better player, but you're really not a better player. You really played against a stupid team because when you're the last one left, the enemy team doesn't work as a team. What they do is they come one at a time as fast as they can to try and kill you, and they have low hit points because they've been fighting, and you have full hit points because you've been hiding. So they're easy to kill. You get lots of kills. Easy game doesn't make you a better player. I have it happen sometimes where I'm the last player. I'm in the back. It's easy to kill all the remaining tanks. But I don't do it on purpose. But stat patters do it on purpose. They do it to manipulate their stats. It doesn't make them a better player. They make sure that their allies are in front of them. They don't want to ever get spotted. And if you look at how they equip their tanks, they're not going to get coated optics, and they're not going to get binocs, and they're not going to put recon and situational awareness. They're not going to put anything like that. They rely on their allies to do all the spotting. They're going to equip everything for defense. They're going to have the spall liner. They're going to have the vertical stabilizer because they're going to be shooting long range outside of the spotting range of the enemy. They're not going to get spotted. They need the gun laying drive and the vertical stabilizer so that they can aim better. That's what they're going to do, and they're gaming the system. They need a good team in order for them to have a good game, and that's it. That's what a stat pattern does. Okay, so that's basically everything that I know about stat pattern. I'm going to tell you a little bit more. There's you could call it an exploit for WN8. One of the issues with WN8 is that they measure kills and damage. But what happens is, in the higher tiers, it's difficult to get a lot of kills, easy to get a lot of damage. In the lower tiers, easy to get a lot of kills, difficult to do high damage. You can't get a lot of damage in a lower game. So what a stat pattern does is he picks an overpowered tank like the FV215B, does 1,750 damage, can one-shot tons of tanks, and he racks up damage, and then he picks an overpowered lower tier tank. And I don't know what the overpowered lower tier tanks are because I don't play them, but I believe that the Panzer 1C might be one of them. So what they'll do is they'll take this tank and they'll get the autoloader and they'll equip it, and they'll have a lot of games in like a tier 3 tank, thousands, with something like a Panzer 1C, where it's easy to get a lot of kills. There used to be an American tank destroyer. I don't remember what it was called. They removed it from the game because it was overpowered. The armor was so strong you couldn't penetrate it, and it would just sit there and kill everybody. And I would play tons of games where I was always being killed by the same tank destroyer. They removed it from the game because it was too overpowered. So a stat pattern has a high tier, tier 10, high damage tank, and a low tier tank with a rapid fire high penetrating gun that they use to rack up kills. Now WN8 is going to say if you get a lot of kills then you're a good player, but what it doesn't know is that you're playing tier 2 or tier 3. Are you a better player because you're killing, seal clubbing in tier 3? No, but that's what stat patterns do. And they get these amazing WN8 scores, but they're exploiting the system. So there's overpowered tanks for every tier, whether it's the armor, the penetration, the autoloaders, etc. But that's what they're doing. They're only playing good tanks, well equipped, and they're declaring themselves better players, but they're really not. They're seal clubbers is what they are. So how do you find a stat pattern? You look at their account, and if you see that they're playing the same tank over and over and over again with no really justifiable reason, thousands of games in the same tier 10 tank or the same tier 2 or 3 tank, then there's stat padding. Another thing that I noticed, I made it to #1 for spotting on the North American server, and I made it from playing, I optimized my tanks for spotting, which means I prioritized spotting over camouflage. I was able to make it to #1. I didn't do it because I was trying to be #1 for stats on the NA server. I did it because I wanted to complete a spotting mission to win the T55A. I had to do like 10,000 spotting damage, and I was able to do it, but I had to reconfigure my tanks. There's a video on my channel that explains how I configured my tanks to do it, and it made me more powerful than other light players, and I took advantage of a lot of things that people don't know about. But it taught me something about playing overpowered tanks. When I was looking at other players on the leaderboard who made it to #1, and what I discovered was the #1 player had played 20,000 games. He was #1, had amazing stats. He had like thousands of pools medals, thousands of top guns. He had so many kills, it was mind-blowing. Like, his average game was 6 kills because he was only playing tier 2. 90% of his games were tier 2 games. Is this guy a better player, getting average of 6 kills per game? No, he was just playing an overpowered tank, 15,000 games tier 2, and he had like 5,000 tier 3 games. Maybe I don't think he's doing it on purpose. There's people who like to play tier 2. I enjoyed playing it once in a while, but they're not better players because they get lots of kills. So if you want to verify, I'm not going to do it right now because of the recording system, but very simple. Go look at the leaderboard and look at the #1 players and see what games they're playing. See if they're playing overpowered tier 2 tanks. Now, this is one of the keys for stat padders in terms of WN8. I speak about win rates in other parts of this video. But if you look at this chart, this is actually my tanks. You'll notice that my OI experimental has a WN8 that is specific to that tank, and that is 1900, right? And it's blue. What do you think happens if I only play my OI experimental? And I only played 21 battles. What would happen is it would bring up my average WN8. And likewise, if I come down here to the bottom and say the BDR G1B, which has a low WN8, and I played this thousands and thousands of games, it would bring my WN8 down. So what a stat padder is going to do is he's going to have access to this, and he's going to say, I want to bring my WN8 up, so I'm only going to play a tank where I have a high WN8. And he's going to skip everything else. And as he plays this, he's going to always be bringing his WN8 up. And if the number ever goes down so that this is no longer the highest, he's going to move to the next one on the list. And that's one of the ways that you optimize. It's called optimization for the WN8. And you can also do it based on the win rate, as I explain elsewhere in the video. You can pick the tank with the highest win rate, and you can go and optimize that. Now, the stat padders, they run XVM, and they say, oh, this Black Prince, he's a purple. That means he's a good player. Yeah, but when I log in with my BDR G1B, and it has a 45%, what do you think those XVM people think? They'll look at that and say, oh, you suck. Do you think I suck because my BDR G1B is a 45% with this low WN8? There could be so many different reasons why my WN8 is low. That's ridiculously low. It could be because I just tried to play through quickly, or I had bad internet connection, or I had a bunch of lousy games, or who knows the reason why, or because I had a crappy crew, or because I was distracted. So there could be lots of reasons why. So you can't look at these numbers and say, oh, you have this low score, so you're a crappy player. It doesn't work that way. Now here's another chart regarding WN8. And if you look at light tanks, you'll notice that my score is really low. I'm an awesome light tank player. I was #1 on the North American server for spotting for light tanks. I'm a top player. I'm an amazing light tank player. Why is my WN8 low? It's because WN8 does not take into account spotting or spotting damage or assisted damage, or things like that. It's just not included. It's a fault in the WN8, a defect that, it's been like that for many years. So other people playing light tanks who don't spot and go and just do lots of damage, they're getting that high WN8, and it makes it look like they're a great light tank player, but they're really not. They're just taking advantage of the fact that there's a defect in the WN8. Now, SPGs, I'm actually a great SPG player. I'm amazing. But the reason why my scores are low is because I never played tiers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I skipped all those tiers because there's a tank called the S51. And you can skip all the lower tiers because of, what is that tank? The KV... Is the KV2 or something like that? The KV that has the big derp gun. You can go to the S51. I don't know if you can still do it. And that's what I did. So when I was playing SPGs, I was playing a higher tier SPG. And the S51 is the most difficult SPG in the game. And it brought my numbers down. But once I became good at it, I'm an awesome SPG player. And I got a lot of tactics that other people don't know about. And I'm deadly in the game. But I just had low scores because of how I just started out. So WN8 is very defective statistic. It does not indicate who's a good player. I once got in with an S51. It had a 38% win rate, and some guy said, "Oh, I can't wait to see how our S51's going to do," mocking me. Yeah, you got to deal with that stuff. Do not trust WN8, and do not trust win rates. Now, based on this chart, obviously another technique that you can use for stats purposes, you'll see that my medium tanks have the highest WN8. I really don't care for medium tanks. I like to play light tanks, and I am awesome at light tanks. You'll notice if you look at my win rate for light tanks is higher than every other class, but my WN8 for light tanks is lower than every other class. That shows you how the statistic is completely defective. So a person who wants to pad his WN8, he's going to say, okay, I'm doing best in medium tanks, I'm only going to play medium tanks. And he'll never play another class where he just doesn't get a good WN8. Those are things that stat padders do. And there are people who literally play every game with the intent on improving their stats. They don't care about spotting if they're spotting. They don't care about sniping if they're a TD. They don't care about brawling if they're a heavy tank. They don't care about winning for their team. They care about their stats. And they will lose a game if it means getting them better stats. And they will play a tank improperly, like they'll snipe with a heavy tank if it means getting better stats. They're stat focused. There's people that do this, and they're not as good as they say they are. It's just inflated statistics. I would like to add, I was an applied math and statistics major in college. You cannot fool me with statistics. I know my numbers. Okay, so we're going to talk about win rates, and I'm going to explain to you why win rates are defective. It's a defective measure. It is not an accurate way of measuring player performance, just like WN8. There's going to be a little addendum. Here you can see I have 49.56 victories, 0.88 draws, got 49.56 defeats. That's standard. It's pretty normal. I've got normal statistics because I don't skew them in any way. I do nothing to manipulate my statistics. Win rates are not individual scores. They're team scores. I've played 27,000, 30,000 battles. There were over 30,000 different teams. That win rate was not with the same team. Therefore, it's not a real statistic. If it were one team that I played 30,000 battles with and we had a 50% win rate, then that would be the win rate for that team. But these are random teams. So therefore, the win rate is not the win rate for any given team. It's, in terms of teams, win rates are complete garbage. It's random. Again, the win rate is not an individual rate because one person doesn't win the game. 15 people win the game. You need it's the team wins, the individual wins. You win three ways. You don't win by winning the hill. You win by killing all enemy tanks or capturing the enemy base. That's how you win. There's no other way. So, and it's got to be done as a team. So you cannot take. I've explained how you can't apply this to random battles as a team statistic because it's 50,000 different teams or whatever. But it's a team statistic that you cannot apply to an individual. There are people who have high win rates. Obviously everyone's going to have a different win rate, but it doesn't indicate that you're a better player. I'm going to explain to you in different reasons why. There's 15 people on a team, and if you divide that by 100, so we get a percentage, it's going to be 7 to 8%. That means that you're going to have 7 to 8% top number one player, 7 to 8% number two player, all the way down to the bottom. It's an equal share. So you're going to have a good player on your team. Well, the enemy is going to have a good player on their team. Now, obviously, it's not every game, but on average, it's going to average out that you're going to have a top 7% player on your team, and the enemy is going to have a top 7% player on their team. Average over 30,000 games. And you're going to have that bottom 7% player on your team, and they're going to have that bottom 7% player on their team, and everyone else is going to be in the middle. When you average out 30,000 games, you have equally skilled teams with equal win rates. So you cannot say it was because of me. The reason why is because there's another guy like you playing on the other team who's equally skilled as you, who's also getting great win rates. Now, think of it this way. If you have your number one player on your team and the number one player on the other team, which team wins? Is it going to be 50-50? If that's on average, that's what it will be. So how are these people getting win rates higher than 50%? They're cheating is the reason why. They're stat padding. Now, another example is the worst players get 38% win rates. Bots get 38% win rates. I had tanks that I played when I first started because I bought premium tier 8 tanks. I got 38% win rate because I only played 1,000 games and I was playing tier 8. They're playing the game too. What happens if you have a number one player, let's say 70% win rate, and on his team he's got a last place player, 38% win rate? Does the team win or lose? If you look at one game, you can say, okay, this game has a top player and the other team doesn't. Yeah, maybe he helped win that game. But when you average it out over 20, 30,000 games, you're going to have a balance. You're going to have the same number of top players equally on both teams, same number of average in the middle players, and the same number of bottom tier players on both teams who drag your scores down. So these top tier players, they got crappy players on their team dragging their scores down too. They should all average out to 49.5% victories, 49.5% defeats, and around 1% draws. If they're not, they're stat padding, whether they know so or not. How do you stat pad? Very simple. You come down here, you click win rate, you take this black prince out and you keep playing that tank, and what does that tell you? Is it the player that's getting the high win rate, or is it the tank? It's the tank. You see that this is a tier 7 and this is a tier 7, and the win rate difference is 5%. And I can find that here's another tier 7 and there's a 10% difference in the win rate. It's the tank. I'm the same player. The difference is not the player in these statistics. It's the tank. One of the best ways to pad win rates is, or even WN8, is just to pick the right tank. So don't believe what you hear about WN8s. It's complete garbage. Only a fool would believe those statistics. They're defective statistics and they are meaningless. Now, there's another way that people lie about their WN8s and other scores, and I'm going to explain it to you here. Someone came to me and he started this argument with me. So I'm a better player than you. I have a higher WN8. And I said, no, you're a sucky player. You just think you're better. And I gave him the same arguments that I appear. You know, I'm a light tank player. You're not You've played large numbers of battles. You know, he was up to like 25, 30,000 battles. I only played like 10,000 battles. And you'll see that my WN8 grows over time, and then it levels off. You cannot compare a player who has 25,000 battles and say you're a better player because your WN8 is higher. When I had 5,000 battles, I was good. I was a better player than other players who had only 5,000 battles. But you're comparing me against someone who has 25,000 battles, and you can't compare the two and say one player is better than the other. They're not the same. They have a different number of battles. The person with the 25,000, he's been playing tier 10 tanks. Look at mine. Look at me tier 10. I've got virtually nothing. And I'm being compared against, even tier 9, I've got virtually nothing. And tier 9 and tier 10 players who only play those tiers come after me and mock my lower score. You know, I play tier 2 because I like the action. I don't play it because I want to kill people. In fact, I don't kill that many people. But I like the fast action and the fast thinking and to learn new techniques. So this is the other reason why. When you compare the WN8s and the average damage and average experience, you have to look at how many battles you've played, because what happens, as I said, is the person who's played more battles has certain advantages that the person who's played less battles doesn't have yet. And that doesn't mean that I'm a bad player because at 10,000 battles I had a lower WN8. I was playing lower tier tanks, and when you look at the last 1,000 battles, his had already leveled off to his maximum. Mine had not leveled off. So when you look at the last 1,000, you have a growing number, which means that there's going to be a low. The number that you're currently at is not your average. It's higher than your average. You have to go back halfway to where your average was, and it skews the numbers, and people will pretend that they have these, I'm a better player. You can't look at just the WN8. Even if you compare WN8 versus WN8, two players with the same WN8, you have to look at the number of battles also, because it indicates whether the player has leveled off yet. You have to compare when the person levels off at his best performance. Here's an example with my win rate. You can see I was at 50%, and I dropped down to 48%. And the reason why is because I bought premium tanks, tier 8s, and I was playing tier 8, and it was difficult, and I didn't know a lot of the basic skills. So my win rate went down, and then this was probably when I got past the tier 4 barrier, which is well known, and then I started picking up again. So you have to look at that also. Don't be fooled by people who just show you a WN8. You have to look at the number of battles also. A lot of people, you know, say, oh, blah, 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 this person has a higher WN8, they're a better player. One thing that is a key indicator, you'll notice over here it says average tier. And unfortunately, the numbers are not showing today, which is sad. But my average tier is like a 6. And the reason why is because I have 94 premium tanks. They're all different tiers. They're not all tier 10. None of them are. And I paid for them. I'm going to play those tanks. I play each one of my tanks once per day to get the triple bonus or the double bonus, and that's it. That's not what a stat patter does. Stat patter picks one favorite tank, plays it 100 times in one day. So what happens is my average tier is between 5 and 6 because I play lots of tier 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. I start out by playing tier 2s just to warm up and to check my internet connection, because I play from South America, got 250 millisecond ping time. If the connection is bad, I might not play for the day. So I use that kind of testing to feel out what it's going to be like. And also, before I play personal reserves, which could run 1, 2 to 4 hours, I play a tier 2 tank just to make sure I'm happy with the performance, because I don't want to waste personal reserves if the internet connection is bad. So a lot of these people, in fact, every single one who ever said, I have a higher WN8, you know, I look at average tier, and they're always having a higher average tier than me, which explains why they have a higher WN8. You don't get high WN8s in low tier tanks. You know, I'm sure it's possible, but it's not common. You know, it would be very difficult, and it would be the exception. So that's another key statistic you want to look at when someone gives you this pretend belief that they're a better player because of WN8. The fact remains, and I'm going to say this, win rates are completely meaningless. If your win rate is above 50%, you're probably stat padding one way or another, whether you know it or not. Although it is true when you compare bots that get 38%, but you're talking about bots, tanks that are essentially not playing the game. They sit at the base and don't move. You know what I mean? That's a bot. They're non-players. You can't say that is player ability. So the WN8 is the same. Everybody should have the same WN8. Sure, there's going to be players that are better. Because WN8 is supposed to be tank by tank. You have to do more damage than other people with that same tank. But it's a defective statistic because it excludes the spotting damage. It excludes the EXP. It excludes all sorts of other statistics. And they only focused on a narrow vision of what they thought it should be. And only the people who choose to do that or choose to stat pad get the higher WN8. And a lot of good players, as I've shown in this video, are skipped over because they don't skew to that, and it makes no sense. You know, I help my team win games, absolutely. I've done so much to help my team win games that it's sad that people believe in the WN8 so much. Now, this is the #1 player by WN8 on the EU server, and I'm going to show you some things about his account that are just a little weird. He's played 24,000 battles, 1,200 of which were in the T34. That means that 5% of his overall games were in the T34. Now keep in mind, in contrast to me, I've got 120 tanks. I don't have, none of my tanks are more than 1% of my battles, right? So he's had a massive number of battles in this tank. It's a little bit unusual. Now look at the IS-3. The IS-3 is a Tier 8 tank. The IS-3 has a reputation for being one of the best all-around Tier 8 tanks. So it might be different now, but 2 years ago in the clan battles, everybody would roll in with IS-3s. 789 battles. Why didn't he level up to the Tier 9 tank? Because he was getting good games in this tank. He liked playing this tank. There's a reason why he kept playing this tank over and over and over again. He was not going through the normal progression to Tier 9 and then to Tier 10, which is what I did and many other people do. So it's very unusual. Now, KV-85 is a Tier 6 tank. Got a lot of battles in that KV-85. Clan wars and team battles. Tier 6 is one of the tiers that they do battles, and Tier 4 is another one. So people have Tier 6 tanks. The Cromwell might be one of them. I don't know if it's a Tier 6 tank or not. But there's going to be a super awesome Tier 6 tank that everybody plays because it's a great tank. I don't think it's a KV-85, but it's unusual for someone to have so many games in a tank in a mid-tier. Why didn't he advance to the Tier 7 tank on that line? It just kind of doesn't make sense. And to be honest, when I look down the list and I see the IS and the 5100, I like to play all these tanks, the Tiger II, etc., but I never have 300 games in a non-premium tank less than Tier 10. The reason why is because I keep advancing. So this player, the #1 player by WN8, he had a different strategy than you might have. Now, if you look at his WN8 scores, amazing scores, 2,800. This is crazy good. But look at his 6 battles, 2 battles, 7 battles. So the next one, we've got a bunch of Tier 9s and Tier 10s. And, of course, you've got these 2 Tier 8s that have also high scores. This one is the E100, which is a great tank, has a great reputation. Amx 50B, great tank, has also a great reputation. M103 is also a great tank, has a great reputation. The Conqueror, I haven't played it yet, so I'm really not sure yet. The Amx M4, I get amazing. This is one of my top tanks, and I hate this tank. I'm really not that crazy about it, but it's got great armor on it. Now, the FCM50T is one of the exceptions because it is fast, but it doesn't really have a great gun, and it doesn't really have great armor or anything. So to get a high score on an FCM50T, yeah, obviously is not the tank. I wouldn't say it's a tank specific. T150 is an amazing, overly powered tank. Amx 5100 is another great tank. WZ111 is like the top tier 8 tank nowadays. It used to be the IS-3, but now the WZ111 is the top tier 8 tank. It's highly overpowered. The T-34 has an amazing turret on it. Got another auto loader. IS-7 is an amazing tank. This is another one of those overpowered tanks that does like 1,750 damage. These are not crappy tanks over here. The only one that I would say is an exception is maybe the FCM50T getting a high score in. All of these tanks that he's getting amazing scores in are amazing tanks. That's just fact. Now you can say, well, he's a good player, but well, let's look down here at the bottom. He's got this B1. He's got a 315 WN8. If he's such a great player, how come in his Churchill he had 140 games? Why does he got such a low WN8 in his Tier 5 Churchill? Or in his Tier 7 Churchill? I wonder if these are both premium. No, they're not. T1 Heavy is an awesome tank. I had amazing games. I had the 8-kill game in a T1 Heavy. You know, he didn't do so well. With me, this is one of my killer tanks. KV-1 is an awesome tank. The BDR G1B is the one that I pointed out with that I had low scores with. You know, I'm not going to judge it. Like, here's the Black Prince. This is one of my top tanks, not one of his top tanks. We have different playing styles. But the fact remains is that his top tanks are awesome tanks. There's absolutely no doubt about it. No one's going to go through this list and say that these tanks suck, except for maybe the FCM50T. Is doing really well. But they're amazing tanks, and that's part of the reason, if not a big part of the reason, why he's got high WN8s with those tanks. And part of it is having a great tank, and part of it is knowing your tank so well that you get great games out of it. Now, if you look at the win rates, a lot of these games, you know, if you have 7 games and a high win rate, you really have to discard it. But when you look at this 220, 222, so with the T10, that's a good tank. We already talked about the M4 and these others. The OI has a great reputation for being overpowered. Black Prince is highly armored for its tier. T-34, E100, these are good tanks. So he's also getting high win rates, but the tanks happen to be also very good tanks. The only one that stands out is the FCM50T. And what I've discovered, looking at people who have high win rates and high WN8 scores, is they tend to play really good tanks. And not only that, for no really just reason, they tend to have high numbers of battles, thousands of battles in tanks that make no sense. Why didn't he level up to the next tank? You know, because it's a good tank. That's the top tank. These are all top tanks. So WN8 is a lot to do with what tank you're playing, and obviously there are good players out there. So truly, you really have to look on a tank-per-tank basis. And when I look on a tank-per-tank basis, you start to see the holes. You start to see that I spot more. Like, you remember we talked about spotting? Look at his. It's 0.67, 0.75, 0.92. Well, we went through mine. All of my heavy tanks were 1.5, 1.8. Etc. So he's not a frontline player. He's got other tanks in front of him. Let's see if we can sort by spot, and maybe we'll get some good numbers. So you can see FCM52 is a fast tank, and it says 1.2. We're going to exclude the mouse because it was only 2 battles. So his fast, heavy tank is lower than almost every single tank that I play for spotting. He's a #1 EU player, but when it comes to spotting, I beat him with almost every single tank I play because I play on the front lines and I spot enemy tanks before my allies do. My allies are behind me. And he doesn't. He's not playing on the front lines. He's got light tanks in front of him. He's got medium tanks in front of him. He's got allies in front of him. He's got other people spotting for him. So that's one of the big indicators.
Now, there's a lot of tanks in the game. I believe there's over 400 tanks in the game. And some of them have something called preferential matchmaking. And what that means is that it has a benefit to matchmaking. It doesn't see the widest range of enemy tanks. So I don't know which tanks have them or not because I don't particularly care. But a stat pattern knows. And what will happen is, if let's say this one has preferential matchmaking, even though I'm sure it doesn't. What it would mean is that it's a tier 7, which means it should see tier 6, tier 7, tier 8 tanks. But the preferential matchmaking tanks could be tier 7 and only see maximum tier 7. I think the IS-6 has preferential matchmaking, which is this tank right here. I don't think this sees, it's a tier 8, I don't think it sees tier 10 tanks, but I'm really not sure. But there are a lot of tanks in that situation. The E25, I believe, might also be a tank that has preferential matchmaking, and there are definitely others. So what a stat pattern would do, they could play one of those tanks, and then they'll have easier games. They're in the mix with everybody else, but they're not going to be going up against tanks that are 2 tiers higher or 1 tier higher, and it's really not fair when you look at it from a stat padding point of view. Now, another thing that happens, this is an IS-6, and you notice that it has a gun on it, which is the 122mm D30. It's a tier 8 tank with a tier 8 gun. This is a KV 122. Now, this is a tier 7 tank, and look at that gun. It's a tier 8 gun. It's a 122mm D25T. Now, I'm going to compare this one to the IS-6. You're going to notice that the penetration, the default is 175 damage, 390. And with this one, it is also 175, 390. And with the APCR, it's 217, 390. And this one with APCR is 217, 390. So you've got 2 tanks, 2 different tiers with a similar spec gun. That means that you can take out this tank, which is 1 tier lower, and have a gun that is 1 tier higher than everybody else in your tier. Obviously, your armor might match the people in your tier, but you have that advantage with the higher tier gun. And there's a lot of tanks that have it. Now, one of the tanks that I like to talk about as an example is the T-29. Because the T-29 is one of the greatest tanks in the game. However, with the stock engine and the stock gun, it's not that great. This is a tier 7 tank. But if you notice, the gun you get with it is a tier 6 gun. So you end up going into higher tiers with a gun that is weak. And a stat pattern will never do that. You'll notice you got a tier 6 gun, a tier 7 gun, and a tier 8 gun. The stat pattern is going to use the free experience in order to get the highest tier gun, while an average player is going to go in this case, a tier 7 tank with a tier 6 gun. You have a disadvantage when you play this tank going into your first few games until you get the better gun. And I'm sure you know you got to get the tracks usually before you get the gun. So a stat pattern doesn't play with those disadvantages. Okay, now there is another statistic in the service record. They may have fixed this, but you see over here it says maximum destroyed in battle and it says 8. I could have sworn that they used to allow the training mode statistic to be here. So you would go into the training mode, you'd kill 15 tanks, the entire enemy team, and it would say 15 was your maximum destroyed in battle. They might have fixed it, because I could have sworn that I used to have like 15 over here, or I have it in one of my accounts, because I didn't play this in the training mode, perhaps. So it's possible that it's still in the game, and it's possible that it's not. But be wary of that statistic. Okay, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about spotting damage. Excuse me. I'm going to go to vehicles. But it's not going to be spotting damage. We're going to look at a different statistic. You see over here, it says I have a Tiger 131. It's a heavy tank. What do heavy tanks do? They brawl. That's what most people would say. How many tanks do you spot with a heavy tank? If you look through most people's statistics, and I've looked at other people's statistics, it's rare that the maximum is 15. It's rare that they have one. Look at what I have under enemy vehicle spotted. It says 8. 8 out of 15. That means, and obviously it was just for one game, but I spotted more than half the enemy team playing a heavy tank in my first game. What does that tell you about me as a player? It tells you that I'm at the front of my team. I'm the one that spots the enemy. I find them to the benefit of my allies. My allies are not helping me out. They're not helping me out by spotting tanks for me. That never happens. They're helping me out by shooting at tanks that I spot. It's a reverse concept. Now, there's going to be other statistics. You can see that there's damage based on stunning. And they changed some of the statistics around. Damage caused with your assistance. You can see I've got 2,000. A Tier 6 tank, a Tier 6 heavy tank, 2,000 damage caused with your assistance. That tells you that I was spotting for my team. I was in danger, and the enemy had to see me because I was damaging other tanks. I was shooting at other tanks. The enemy saw me. So we're going to look at some tanks that I played more. Let's look at the AT-15. Now this one has a lower number. Enemy vehicle spotted 1.33. I guarantee you, if you look at other people who have an AT-15, which is a slow tank, they're not going to have 1.33. They're going to have numbers like 0.3. They're going to have numbers like 0. It's a slow tank. It's difficult to spot with. But yet, even though it's a slow tank, when I play, I spot enemy tanks before my allies do. And the damage caused with my assistance. Okay. So let's move on. Amx M4 49. You'll see this number 1.5 is going to be kind of common. This is a Tier 8 heavy tank. My Churchill is a rather slow tank. My enemy vehicle spotted is 2. That means that I have to pass behind my light tanks, medium tanks, faster tanks on my team, and I still spot 2 enemies that my allies have not spotted playing with a heavy tank. And the reason why is because they're campers, they sit in the back, and I'm the one who goes to the front and to the dangerous part. So you're going to see it on all of my tanks. Look at the Oni, 1.8. We're going to find the Tog, because the Tog I know is a lot of people. The Tog is one of the slowest tanks in the game. It's like 14 kilometers. So you go over here and you see my Tog is 0.66. Now keep in mind, slowest tank in the game, 0.66, and it's not because I'm camping in the back. This is me trying to be in the front lines. What this statistic is important for is because a stat pattern doesn't want to be in the front lines. They want to be behind their allies. They want their allies to be in the front. They want the enemy to shoot at their allies. They want to be hiding. They want the allies to do all the dirty work. They want the allies to do all the spotting. They're going to hide, let nobody know where they are. They want to keep all their hit points. They're going to have lots of zeros. They're going to have 0.6 for light tanks when I've got it on a Tog. So we're going to look at some of my light tanks just to show for comparison what type of numbers I get with a light tank. We're not going to look at we could look at the Tier 2s, not that big of a deal. Well, we'll look at an SPG. Okay, so I got 0. This one has 0.18, so even with an SPG, I spotted something. I'm going to pick the SU-100, which is a tank destroyer, 1.3, because I play it the same as any other, 1.28. For this tank destroyer, we'll find light tanks. This one, 2.76. This one, 1.5. Tier 6, 4.15. 4.85. 3.6. 2.93. 4.6. 3.85. So you'll notice that when I play the light tank, I'm getting double the number of tanks spotted as my other tanks. And that's because I rush out there and I try to spot the enemy. And I'm sure if you wipe the slate clean, like here's my RU-251, 6.23. And the reason why is because the RU-251 is the fastest tank in the game. You know, it used to do 80 kilometers, and these 95 games I played at 80 kilometers, I got out there and I spotted tons of tanks. A stat patter is not going to have a high number under enemy vehicle spotted. He's going to have a really low number. That's how you can tell that they're stat patterns. It means that they're taking light tanks and they're putting the vertical stabilizers and the gun rammers, and they're hiding in the back, and they're not doing spotting. And the damage caused with your assistance is going to be really low for stat patterns. 4.18 for the M41, 3.06 for the SPIC. There's also something called an award. And here's another way that you can indicate a stat pattern. For example, if they play light tanks, you look over here, I've got this stage award, and it says Popel's Medal. You can see that I'm Class 1. Class 1 means I've detected over 20,000 tanks. A stat pattern playing light tanks is not going to have a Class 1. He's going to have a Class 3, a Class 2, etc. So when you look at the stage awards, you're going to be able to determine who's a stat pattern and who isn't, because someone who is at the forefront is going to spot more tanks and spot more SPGs, kill more SPGs. They're going to have more Pascucci's medals. Anything related to spotting SPGs or damaging the front line, you know, damaging tanks that you have to be the first one there to do it, a stat pattern is not going to have those medals. That's one of the things that you do. When people say, oh, I got a great WOT8, the first thing I do is I go straight to the comparison page for stage awards, spotting damage, and it exposes them. It shows that they have zeros for spotting, which means that even with heavy tanks, they've got low numbers because they're hiding behind their allies. Big giveaway right there. Okay. I didn't try to do this. I had to do a mission to do 10,000 spotting damage, and I did it. I had to configure my light tank, prioritizing spotting over camo. I had to remove the camo and put on binocs, all that stuff. And playing in a couple of days, in 2 or 3 days, I became #1 on the North American server for spotting. That's on the weekly chart. So I became #1 on the weekly chart just by playing 2 or 3 days. And these people are arrogantly telling me that I'm not a good player because I don't have a good WN8. If I'm the #1 spotter, and I'm going to show you my light tanks, keep in mind, to do 10,000 damage, you got to play higher tier. Why didn't it do it? I clicked the light tank and it's okay. Okay, so you have to get the high spotting damage, you have to play tier 8. Now it's shifted to tier 9. So these were the tanks I had to choose from to get the 10,000 damage. With these tanks, I became #1 on the North American server for spotting. In 3 days, I #1 on the weekly chart. And these people are telling me that I'm not a good player. You know what? Because my WN8 is not high enough, WN8 doesn't reward me, even though I'm the #1 player for spotting on the North American server. What does that tell you about WN8? It's a simple fact. It's defective because it doesn't include spotting and spotting damage. And the players that play that way lose out. Okay, so let's move on to some other cool techniques that you're going to absolutely love. Okay, we're going to go back to marks of excellence because in this video, I'm going to talk about marks of excellence, but there's something that I left out, and I'm going to add it at this point in the video. You go over here, and you see there's a mark of excellence, and my current number is 66% for 1 mark. Now, when the number goes down, let's say you're not playing, the number's going to fluctuate. I don't know if it fluctuates every day or every week. I'm not sure, however often they calculate it. But the number fluctuates. As the number goes down, that means it's to your disadvantage. You want a high number. If it goes down, that means the competition is really good. Other players are doing lots of damage, so they're bringing that percentage down. When the competition is bad, because let's say it's a holiday, or I don't know if they, like I said, it could be because they compute it every day. Maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, the number goes up. When the number goes up, it's to your advantage. That means that the average that was calculated for the last 14 days is to your advantage. The player base wasn't playing as good. That also means that if you maximize games in that tank when it's to your advantage, that means that you can get a higher mark of excellence real easy. So I'm going to give you an example. The Chrysler GF is a tank that recently came out. And when the tank comes out, everybody starts playing it. Because they're playing this so much, they stop playing other tanks. And because they're not playing the low because they're playing the Chrysler GF. So the percentage for the mark of excellence for the low is going to change. It's going to fluctuate. It's going to become less competitive, so that number is going to go up. On the North American server, they have light tank week. Everybody plays their light tanks. They have heavy tank week. You get bonuses for playing your heavy tanks, which means that people aren't playing their medium tanks. So what happens is it becomes less competitive in the player pool for the medium tanks, so that number is going to go up. So if you want to get your mark of excellence, you go to your medium tanks, you play your medium tanks where the percentage went up, and you have an easier chance of getting a mark of excellence. It's gaming the system. So the Chrysler GF comes out. Everybody's playing the Chrysler GF. You get into games. I've seen games where there's 30 tanks and there's 12 people on each team playing TOGs or something like that. It happens. When that happens, you know that they're not playing other tanks. And that means that those other tanks are less competitive. That means that they're doing less damage. That means that if you play those, you're going to have a higher ratio with less damage. It's less competitive. So you can game the system and then just spend one day playing like 50 or 100 games and bump up to the next mark. It's gaming the system, but it's a trick that people use to get marks of excellence, and it's not authentic. I just play, and I don't even try to get marks of excellence, but I've reviewed it, and I understand that that's the way that it can be done. Okay, now one of the things that I'm going to talk about is the victory rate. And this is all of my tanks, not just the ones I have in the garage. Everything I've ever played. You'll see, obviously, there's some tanks that I only played once. But what you're going to notice is that there are tanks that have high win rate and a lot of games, like the SU-100. I hate this tank. This is one of the hardest tanks to play. I absolutely hate playing it. I've played 60 games and I have 70% win rate, and it's one of my best performing tanks. This tank to me is an atrocious piece of garbage, and it's one of my best performing tanks. What does that tell you? Black Prince. So Excelsior is the example I like to use. You'll notice that my Excelsior, 118 games, 66% win rate. This is the tank that when I roll it out, I'm like, I'm going to kill a lot of tanks because I'm in the Excelsior. Got a great gun, rapid fire, which I need. It's got great armor, great turret armor, and the Excelsior is fast and mobile, so I can hunt down enemy tanks. So that's why I have a high win rate. It's compatible with my playing style. I don't like the slow tanks with the heavy damage guns, you know, or TDs. I used to be, if you watch my old videos, you hear me talk about how much I hate playing tank destroyers, and I always did lousy in them. Things are different now. Now I'm better at tank destroyers, so I get better scores than I did before. So if you want to improve your win rate, all you do is play the tank with the highest win rate. And as the number goes down, if the Excelsior goes down to 64%, you just play the next tank on the list. And that's what a stat pattern will do to increase his win rate. However, the same thing works with WN8. Every tank has a WN8 number, just like a win rate. You go to a site like noobmeter.com, and it will show you the WN8s. Okay, so now this is the second part of my video about stat padding. I'm going to make it clear that at the very end, I'm going to tell you the one key ingredient for stat padders, which is platooning, and I'm going to explain that at the end, but that's going to be the final ingredient. Platooning is the key for stat padders. Okay, so where are we? Last year there was a marathon where if you get 5 games in a row for each tank, and you get the highest average EXP, and you win personal reserves. Look how many personal reserves I have. The total is 396. No, is that the total? 396 is what it says. It says activate 396. The reason why I have so many is because the reason why I have so many personal reserves is in part because I try to get them, but also because I am a good player. And last year during the marathon, I won like 90 personal reserves. And in some cases, I was like the number 5 player. For example, with the AT-15, which is a British tank, it was either the AT-15 or the AT-15A. With one of these tanks, I was in like the top 10, and I didn't think I was such a great player, but it's probably because not a lot of people own these tanks. So I was able to get higher rankings. With the 1357 GF, I'm pretty sure I was able to get a high ranking, the other light tanks that I'm good at. So I was able to get a lot of high rankings. One of the reasons why is because I have like 90 premium tanks. That's how many I have. If I click over here and click on the premium tank button, 94 premium tanks I have. So everybody doesn't have it. I was able to play all those tanks, get good high averages. I won a lot of those marathons, won tons of those personal reserves. I was able to do so because I had the tank that the other person didn't have. It's obviously not stat padding, but I got the higher stats to win all those prizes. I won, like I said, almost 100 personal reserves. It was like 15 per tank or something like that. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. The T-29 is an American heavy tank. And there's going to be other tanks that have a similar situation. This is the T-29. The T-29 is one of the absolute best tanks in the game. Has a great gun, it has great turret armor, and you're going to hear people say how great this is and how fun it is to play. I think the T-32 also has, is it the T, maybe it's the tank after it. But some of these tanks have just amazing armor. Like, okay, so the T-32 with the T-119, if you look at the armor, 298 frontal armor. That's better than almost every Tier 10 tank. This is mind-blowing. When you want to do a damage block by armor or you want to play hull down, this is a tank you do it with that turret. So the T-29 has a lot of these features. Great gun, great turret, etc. However, when you play stock, the engine is absolutely horrible. It's only 720 horsepower. The higher one is 800 horsepower, but it makes a difference. When I played this game, I had crappy games until I got the higher tier engine. When I had the higher tier engine and I could drive this thing all over the place, I was able to kill more tanks, do more damage, and have better games. So a stat padder isn't always looking for just the better gun. The better engine can make a huge difference with certain tanks. The French heavy tanks, you need the better engine. Some of these American heavy tanks, and I would say heavy tanks in general, but there's a lot of tanks where the engine makes a difference between a losing player and a winning player. Okay, now, so in the game, there's something called the Matchmaker, and they recently changed it to the 357 template system. But before, they had a different system, and it was studied by a player, 4 tankers and a dog. He studied the Matchmaker. There's a video on YouTube that explains his study, and what he discovered is the first 10 games you play with a tank that you research, let's say you get this tank, you get to be the top tank for the first 10 games. And I believe he discovered that it was a pattern. And when you research advanced modules, they put you up against stronger tanks, so you're no longer the top tier. So basically, a stat padder takes advantage of this. The first 10 games, you're the top tank. You want to make sure you got the best gun and the best engine. So not only does a stat patter use the free XP to get the best gun, the best engine, the best radio, but he takes advantage of the fact that those first 10 games, he's going to be the top tier on both teams, regardless of the layout of his tank. So that's kind of unfair. Now I'm going to explain to you the example with my Churchill. When I got my Churchill, I don't remember which one it was because there's like 3 different Churchills in the game. I rolled it out. I got like 6 kills. I got 1,450 EXP in my first game. It was amazing. And it was an easy game because, you know, they make you the top tier for the first 10 games. But when you get that, you get 100% win. You get this amazing EXP. And you can play lots of crappy games. And because of the way the EXP, the average EXP is, getting that 1,450 as your first amazing game meant that it was very difficult. I could play lots of crappy games and I would still have a high EXP. But let's say I had 1,000 games and I got 1,450 EXP. It has a small impact because it's 1 out of 1,000 games. But if you only have one game where you get an amazing game, it gives you these amazing stats. And when you look at the service record, I showed it earlier. You look at my Churchill, and you look at average EXP, you'll see that my Churchill has a high 847 average EXP. Obviously, it's 173 battles now. And I don't know if it was this tank or if it was the other Churchill in the British tech tree, but because I had that amazing game, it made my average EXP really high. So now you can see I have this Tiger 131. I only played one game. I got 1,205 EXP. That's that Tier 6 tank. This is the Tier 6 tank. I got 1,205 EXP. I can have a lot of crappy games. If I have a game where I get 0 EXP, my average will still be 600, and it will still be better than most players. So having a good first game, you go out with your best. You get your full crew, your APCR rounds, your top gun, top engine, top radio. You got the coated optics and the gun rammer and the stabilizer, and you use the food consumables. You get this amazing game, get this amazing EXP, and you're set. You're golden. It's very difficult for that to go down. I will have strong average EXP with this tank for a long time, and it's something that a stat pattern can take advantage of, and it's not right. It makes it look like I'm an amazing player, but I'm not. No, obviously I am a very good player. I honestly am a good player. If you watch my videos, you'll see that I have a lot of knowledge. I know all the tactics. I have a lot of knowledge that other people just don't have. Even the best players don't have a lot of the knowledge that I have. So if you compare it to my other Tiger, look at my Tiger P. They're similar tanks. The Tiger P is a higher tier, and look at my EXP. It's half of what my Tiger 131 is. So this is just a luck of the stats, as you could say. So the old Matchmaker had something in it that gave you this advantage for the first 10 games, and plus getting that amazing first game or a good couple first games in will certainly skew your stats. Okay, so now the other thing that some people do that are stat patterns, they run a program called XVM. What XVM does, all the things it does, it shows you who's a good player on the enemy team and who's a bad player. And obviously it's using WN8 and it's not 100% accurate. But in general, if someone has a low WN8, nobody stat pads to fail. So if their WN8 score is really low or their win rate is like 38%, they're probably not a good player. A stat pattern knows that they're not a good player, so they're going to go after those players because they're easy targets. And they're going to avoid the stronger players who have higher scores because they know it's a higher risk. So running XVM, they call them tomatoes and oranges or whatever. A stat pattern avoids a tough fight, goes after easy targets, runs away from the tough fight. You get the same stat padding. You get the same 3 marks whether you kill the easy tank or whether you kill the difficult tank. And that's something that stat patterns take advantage of. The other thing that stat patterns do, a lot of them cheat. A lot of them are using Aimbots. If you watch reviews from all the top players, that post their commentaries, you'll find people using Aimbots. And what Aimbots will do is they'll lead ahead when you're moving fast at a distance, so it'll pre-aim, so it increases the chance that you hit a fast-moving target. And when you're at close range, they aim for weak spots. And I see people using Aimbots all the time. And the reason why is because they have weird gun movements. And when you're moving rapidly and you're in close quarters and you see their gun making these weird jerky movements, they're using an aimbot. For example, I had this one where the enemy was on a pile of rubble, I was on a pile of rubble, our tanks were going all over the place. It was impossible for us to shoot at each other normally, but his gun kept jerking around and locking on to different parts of my tank. And if I made a sudden move, his gun made a sudden move. And it was because he was using an aimbot. So people cheat using aimbots, it's a fact, and it pads their stats. There's not only aimbots that you can cheat with. There's another one that's popular where if it shows you if somebody knocks down a fence or knocks down a tree, and it shows you on the map exactly where they are. So if you're unspotted and they're running that cheat, they know where you are if you knock down a fence or something like that. And for example, there was a game, it was a clan war game where there was one guy left on the enemy team, and he knocked down a fence, and because it was a clan war, the whole world was watching. The enemy team all of a sudden all turned towards the direction where the fence got knocked down. But how could they know that the fence got knocked down? They knew because they were running the cheat. And because it was a clan battle and everyone was watching the replay, they all saw the whole clan at the same time turn towards that location, so they knew they were using the cheat for knocking down the fence. And it's not fair, but that's what people do. It pads their stats. And there's other ones like Tundra, which removes all the bushes, so you don't see any bushes. There's other ones where it makes it so that your gun doesn't hit a building. So for example, if a tank is next to a building, what the aimbot will do is it will move the pointer so that it's adjacent to the building. So even if you try to, if there's an object in the way and you point towards the object, it'll automatically move it towards the tank so that you don't hit the object by mistake and it hits the tank. That's one of the other cheats. There's lots of other cheats. Offhand I don't remember all of them because I don't use them, but they do exist. Okay, so another trick that stat padders do is they will take a light tank. Now keep in mind, you can get a high WN8 in any tank. So what they'll do is they'll take a light tank, let's say this tank, no, that's not a good example. Let's say the Spa Panzer. Most people like me that play this tank, I've got binocs, coated optics, and vents, so I can see further. And I go out and spot and I don't fire the gun. And I play games where I do 0 damage. What a stat padder does is they take this, but instead of spotting, they put the gun ramming drive, the V-stab, they don't do any spotting, and they fire the gun and they do a lot of damage. And they snipe from the back. So what happens is they do more damage than the typical light tank player, so it makes them appear on WN8 to be a better player, because WN8 doesn't know the difference between spotting damage and real damage. It excludes spotting damage. So again, when I play, I get games where I do 0 damage. I get amazing games, but a stat padder will go and do a lot of damage with this tank because other players do 0 damage, so he gets above average damage scores. He gets a higher WN8, and he's a stat padder. If you read in the forums about stat padding, people will talk about, oh, play light tank, do lots of damage. That's what they're talking about, because other light tank players are doing 0 damage, so they're doing lots of damage to pad their stats. And they do it because they want to get in a clan, they want to look like they're a better player, they want to get attention. That's the reason why they do it. They seriously do this. Okay, now the next thing is marks of excellence. We already discussed it, but I'm going to discuss another technique that you can do to cheat on marks of excellence, to get a mark of excellence when you really didn't follow the system. You'll notice over here it says 66% is my current ratio. I'm going to look at the next one. This one says 68%. This one says 19%. I haven't played a lot of games. This one has 71%. This one has 62%. Okay, this is a good example. I have a mark of excellence. You need 65%, but I currently have 62% because the ratio went down. But once you get the mark of excellence, you can't lose it. So what some people do is they'll watch the percentage. The percentage goes up and down. So let's say it goes up to 70% and I don't have the mark of excellence. You just have to play one game, have a crappy game, and you're going to get the mark. If it's 62%, and you don't have the mark and you have a crappy game, you're not going to get it. So what they do is they watch the current ratio at the bottom, which fluctuates, and they wait until it's to their advantage, which means it goes up. And when it goes up, then they play the tank. They don't have to do as well, and they increase the chance of getting the mark of excellence. Another example is there's going to be times that people play more. On the weekends with the triple bonuses, it's more competitive. The good players come out. During the week, you get the weaker players. During holidays, let's say it's July 4th, New Year's Eve, the week after Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter vacation, spring break, summer break, it changes the number of people playing, the skill level of the people that are playing, and it changes the ratio for getting a mark of excellence. So what you do, you're going to get a higher ratio when other players play with lower performance. So during the time periods of lower performance, which is during the week, during the vacations when the competitive players aren't playing anymore, or Thanksgiving dinner, who's going to play during Thanksgiving dinner? The numbers are going to fluctuate to your advantage. You watch that number, you play when it's to your advantage, you increase your chance of getting 1 mark or 2 mark or 3 marks, and it's gaming the system. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to mention was platooning. You're going to see in forums, people always will say solo pubbing. When they say solo pubbing, they mean random battle as an individual. And there's a reason why they say random battle, and that's because over here you have random battle, ranked battle, team battle, strongholds, team training. There used to be something else called tank company, and what you could do with the tank company is you could make your own 15 versus 15 game, but you could be like, you invite your friends to play, and you be the good player and everyone else is the sucky player. And what people were doing is they were gaming the system with this tank mode, whatever, I don't remember what it's called. They removed it in the 9.19 update, so it's no longer there. Tank Company it was called. And I only played Tank Company 1 or 2 times. But what they would do is they would go there and they would create teams that were to their advantage, and they would use it to make it sound like they would use it to stat pad is basically what they were doing. So when you hear people saying, are you solo pubbing? They mean public battle, random battle, which means no tank battle. So you can now go into different modes. For example, there is the ranked battle and the team battle, and you can get a different competitive group. You will get different average EXP. You will do different amounts of damage. The damage pools are different. Because ranked battle is only tier 10, team battle has fewer tanks, which means that there's a smaller damage pool. And when these are I don't know if they're counted into WN8. I'm pretty sure that if you look at different stats, you're going to see these things mentioned. And what stat padders are going to do is they're going to take advantage of things like Tank Company, where they can skew the team so that they can put themselves on a good team against weaker teams. With a team battle, you have good teams that win many games playing against crappy teams. It happens because it's a ladder system. And if you're a new player, you go in, you're playing your first game, and the other guy is on his 10th game with a winning team, and you're on a random team that's just been cobbled together, they're going to win. They have an advantage. So they use this to skew their stats. So when people talk about solo pubbing, they're referring in part to people that are not playing random battles, and they do it in part to stat pad. And the other word is solo. So you have something called platooning. And most people know what a platoon is. You use this button here, you create a platoon, and you can have 3 people in your platoon. Now, this is the biggest key right here to stat padding, is platooning. And the reason why is because Most people platoon because they like to chat with their friends, or they platoon to do a mission where you have to platoon and you get a combined score. But what a stat padder does is he platoons to pad his stats. He gets 2 of his friends and they play as a team. Playing as a team means that the 3 of them will always be together. They're going to watch each other's back. It's never going to be 1-on-1 against the enemy. It's always going to be 3-on-1 because their buddies are always going to be with them, and they're never going to separate from their buddies. And they look for individual tanks, and they go after individual tanks 3-on-1 and take them out. Or if you're, for example, playing in an alley map like on Himmelsdorf, or any type of thing where one tank has to go out and shoot, and another tank has to go out and shoot on the enemy, and they take turns. Well, how did you like it if you're one tank up against 3 tanks on the enemy team that are all friends, and they play, and they say, we're all going to shoot at the same tank, we're going to kill the same tank, I track him, you damage him, and they all go out at the same time, and you can't shoot 3 tanks at once, but the 3 of them can all fire at you at once. That's the advantage that you have with platooning, and people take advantage of it. There's a guy that I found. This is a real account. I'm not going to say his name. He has an 80% win rate with some crazy number of games, like 20,000 games. 80% win rate minimum. And what I discovered is he bought a tier 8 tank. He used it to get tons of free EXP. It was an IS-6. He leveled up all of his tanks to like tier 8, 9, and 10. So he skipped like the first 7 tiers just through free EXP. How does he get an 80% win rate? He probably did it by platooning with other good players. Imagine if you got to pick 2 of the best players in the game. You can name 2 top players, and they were always your platoon mates every game you played forever. You'd have amazing win rates. You'd have amazing WN8s, because when you're going to get damage on the tank, the enemy's gun isn't pointed at you, it's pointed at someone else, so you're racking up damage without the enemy shooting back at you. And that's why platooning is the key to stat padding. And the worst stat padders would never play a game unless they're in a platoon with friends who watch their backs. I had a game once, I was platooning with a friend, and we rode around together, but we were just playing for fun. So we would stay close to each other, etc. And what happened was he had died, and I was on the verge of dying. And there was an ally behind me who refused to intervene while I was dying. And my ally said, why didn't you save him? And you know what he said? Oh, he's a tomato, referring to me. And this is when I was like a new player, only had played a couple thousand games. What that guy was saying was, he had XVM, he knew that my rating was a low rating, so he felt that I was not worth saving, so he let me die. Does this sound to you like a good player? That guy was not a good player, but he was stat aware, and he probably stat pads. He refused to risk any damage to his tank because it was more important for him to stay in the game, because he didn't value my stats. These people are real. They're in the game. And it's like I said, they do it because they need to get accepted into a clan. They have to have a high WN8, in order to play a team battle. I'm going to show you right now, because you may not have seen it. You go over here to go to team battle, and you can do create team. And you're going to see next to my name, it says 4766. It has my service record. And if you want to get into a game, there's teams that won't accept you if you have a low score. So people have to stat pad their service record, get a higher number so they can get in a team. It doesn't mean that they're a better player. Now, the fact remains is, one of the problems I have, I play internationally. I play from South America on the North American server. My ping time is 250 milliseconds. The game drops out all the time. I'm constantly rebooting the game, losing connections. The game just pauses and my tank freezes for a couple of seconds. The worst thing is, when you're one-on-one and you're both one-shots and you both fire at the same time, the other guy's always going to win. You know, there's so many times when I click the button, the guy doesn't look like his gun is pointed at me, and I end up blowing up. You have to deal with that when you play internationally. And I've heard people say that South American players have low stats. It's not because they suck. It's because of the latency that they have to deal with. I had a game yesterday. I played one game yesterday, started the game. It never started the game. I had to reboot the computer. by the time, I couldn't reboot the computer. The commands to reboot the computer would not work. I had to power it off, power it back on, reboot, log back in, and when I finally got in, the game was over, and our team had lost. And that happens, and it happens often. It happens more than 1 out of every 100 games. Probably 5% of my games are damaged due to dropouts and latency. And because I'm a light tank player, when you have latency problems, I'm always the first one spotted. The enemy always finds me first. I get abused badly from having bad latency. Now, the last issue that is to the stat padder's advantage is to not be a frontline player. I've got hundreds of videos. You can watch all of my videos. The last year or two, you'll see that every game I am in front of my team, and my team is behind me. Or I play by myself in the middle of nowhere with no one backing me up. Every game I do this. It's rare that I don't. It's very rare that I don't. 99% of the time, that's what I do. I'm always the first one spotted. The artillery always shoots at me first. The enemy knows where I am first. They always go after me first. I often die first, even if I get the highest EXP, because I do a lot of spotting damage while I'm doing this. But it does affect your stats because the enemy is. It's like me against 15 tanks. When the game starts and I go find the enemy, as soon as I get spotted, the enemy, 15 enemy tanks know where I am, but they have no idea where the rest of my team is. So it's 15 against 1. 15 enemy tanks know where I am. My allies have not been spotted yet because they're still back at base, they're camping, etc. So it's a huge disadvantage. And I'm not going to quit doing it because I love playing. I love the challenge. But it's very difficult to be a one-shot and make your way back to behind your allies and have your allies for protection. It's something that I'm working on doing, and I hope is going to turn it's the final key for me to having better stats. But my playing style vastly affects the outcome of my statistics, and I'm not going to quit it just because some crybaby says, "Oh, I have a higher WN8 than you do, so I'm a better player." You know what? It's just not true. Again, you can watch my videos. I go through all the techniques that I have, all the methodology I use, and you can see that even the best players don't know the techniques that I know. You can watch my videos, and you'll see I'll talk about how I do my angling, and they don't know these techniques. And you can watch clan videos. You can watch the best players, the best of the best. Obviously, they get better over time, but you're going to find that they don't know basic techniques about reloading and hiding and reloading. You see lots of tanks that reload out in the open. It's stupid. I constantly watch the minimap. I always know absolutely what's going on. Okay, so this is beyond the scope of stat padding, but I am a good player, and there's lots of good players that get a bad rap because of WN8 and other stats, win rates and stuff. It's just complete garbage. Only a foolish person believes in WN8 and win rates. Win rates are team scores, they're not individual scores. And WN8 doesn't include spotting damage and EXP. It's skewed. They do need better stats, but it's going to be a long time before they come out with one unified stat that really shows who's a good player and who isn't. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was really informative. I did this hopefully to quiet the argument. If you do enjoy my video, it's very important that you subscribe. I don't have a lot of subscribers to my channel, and because I don't, it means I just upload less. I have tons of great videos that you would love to see. My videos are unique. You'll see I have a video about how to blow up engines. I'm the only one that has a video like that. How to set the engine on fire. I know how to use HE rounds unlike anybody. If you look at my HE round videos, you'll see I know all sorts of weak spots on enemy tanks, and how to use HE rounds that even the pro players don't know how to do. If you watch my equipping light tanks videos, I didn't know how to get amazing spottings, 10,000 spotting damage per game until I went through every aspect of the tank and optimized it. So I've got videos on optimizing, for example, spotting over camouflage. You think a light tank needs camo. I run it without camo because spotting, you want more spotting damage, you got to be able to spot more. I've got information on every way how to train your crew. There's a reason why I have amazing crews on my tanks. See if we can pull one up. No, that's not going to be a good example. But I mean, this is a Chinese tank with 4 crew skills. That's really good. There's a reason why. It's because I did. I set out to train my crew, so I've got 5 crew skills on so many tanks, and it was easy to do. You just have to know the techniques on how to do it. Okay, so it's important if you like my videos to join. The more subscribers I have, the more uploads I will do. I am able to do a video every day, but I don't because I don't have enough subscribers. If I had enough subscribers, I would do a video every day or multiple videos every day. Okay, thank you, and if you have any questions or comments, please post below. Now I'm going to show you a comparison. This is comparing me against the #1 player on the North American server. I think it was based on WN8. I'm not doing this to mock the other person, but I just want to show you how my statistics differ from someone else who has a high WN8. You're going to notice that anything that's related to spotting, I'm going to have more of. You know, I got 3 times as many patrol duty awards, which means we did spotting damage for 6 tanks. And then we've got the Invader, which is capture points. And we've got Scout was detecting 9 vehicles and winning the battle. I did 228 times. Almost 10 times as much as he did. Let's see. What else we got here? Battle Buddy. Now, Battle Buddy is interesting. Do not cause any damage to allies for 50 battles. I've got 290. He's got 35. I got almost 10 times as many as he does. This means that when I fire the gun, I'm not hitting an ally 50 battles in a row. It's easy for me because my allies are behind me. So it's rare that I hit an ally. If I hit an ally, it's because the ally is running really fast in front of my gun. That's almost always what happens. The players that don't have this, that they're hitting allies more often, we've played the same number of battles. It's because he's further in the back. He's got more allies in front of him. He's not doing it on purpose. He's accidentally hitting allies, but it's because he's got more people in front of him. He's not playing in the front lines. You know, he's back. And we're going to see this in more of the statistics. Okay, so here's a spotting badge. I've got more of it. It's not that important. There's going to be more here. You'll see. Gore's Medal. Okay, we'll skip that. Cool-headed. This is a statistic. It says survive at least 10 ricochets and 9 non-penetrating hits in a row from the enemy. I've got 268. He's got 62. So I've got 4 times as many as he does. What this means, I'm getting medals because the enemy is shooting at me and not penetrating my tank. The reason why you get this medal is because the enemy has to see you to shoot at you. It's not because he's so fast he evades their bullets or something like that. It's because he's in the back. He's in the back and he stays hidden so the enemy doesn't see him. He's hiding. I'm in the front. My statistics are that I spot the enemy. The statistics show I take damage from the enemy. I take hits from the enemy. If you look at the damage, I didn't find one here, but if you look at damage statistics of me being hit, I take a lot of damage. His is going to be, he's causing a lot of damage, but he's not spotting very many. As I showed, I outspot him in almost every tank. And he's not being hit, and he's hitting more allies because there's tanks between him and the enemy. So he's in the back more, according to these statistics. Now you're going to say, well, he's a better player because he knows to stay in the back. And I'm going to say, I'm a better player because I don't need my team to spot for me. I don't need my team to find the enemy. What he needs is a team. Without his team, he's going to have completely different stats. I'm sure he's a great player. But without his team, his stats will be completely different because he won't have his team to distract the enemy, to divert the enemy's attention, all that stuff, his stats will be more like mine. I do need my team for the spotting damage because I need my team to shoot at enemy tanks. But I'm defenseless when I'm in the front. You watch my videos, you'll see I am in the front. There's nobody around me. I'll be all by myself for half the map, surrounded by enemy tanks because I know how to hide. I know how to hide near the enemy. But when they spot me, it can be very risky. So the stat system is very different because no one's going to stop the enemy from shooting at me. The enemy charges me all the time. I can sit in the back and I could hide. I could get a big gun. I could wait for enemy to be spotted, blast them with a high-powered gun. I could do the same thing, and I would have great WN8, great win rates probably. I would have all sorts of amazing stats. But I don't like to play that way. I don't think it's challenging. It's boring for me. I like the hunt. So his statistics would be different if he weren't playing way in the back. And if you looked at his light tank score, which is not on this page, I might have showed it on the other page. His light tank scores were his least scoring WN8, and they were higher than mine, even though I'm the number one. I was the number one light tank player on North America, and he's not. So the other statistic that I wanted to show was spotted vehicles. Let's see if we can find it. It's going to be over here. And you'll see the difference in pure numbers and raw numbers. It's going to take a while, but basically I spot twice as many vehicles as he does. And again, it's because of the different playing style. So the page is going to be slow to show up, but I had double. I don't remember if his was 30,000 and mine was 60,000. Or something like that, but those are the types of numbers we're talking about, and it's like I said, it's just absolutely a different playing style. You can see the green on the left means that I perform better than him. The green on the right means he performed better than me, and it goes both ways. And you can see that there's a lot of tanks that I play that he never played. However, there's almost no tank that he's played that I haven't played. So I'm playing a wide breadth of tanks, and he's playing very specific tanks. Okay, here's the exception. And you notice that they're all tier 9 and 10. He's got all these tier 9 and 10 tanks that I've never gotten to yet. Probably because he free XP'd it. Like, how did he get all these tanks if he didn't have the tanks that come before them? I'm not saying that he did that, but that is something that you can tell from looking at these. He's got all these, I don't have tier 10 tanks. Okay, so we'll skip that. Okay, so this wasn't the page I was looking for. These are rating, etc. So don't trust these statistics. They're just full of all sorts of inaccuracies. Now, there's another aspect that I forgot to talk about, which is re-rolling accounts. And what happens is people play the game for like 5,000, 10,000 battles, and they open a new account, start all over again, and then they seem like amazing players, but really they're not. They have a lot of experience beforehand, and what they did was re-rolled the account, and it makes their stats look better, their WN8s, etc. And they do this because they want to look like better players. There's almost no reason to do it. Now, I'm going to show you something suspicious about the activity in this account. This is the number one player on the NA server. And what he's doing is perfectly permissible, but it shows you the difference between a person who plays through normally and a person who doesn't. You'll notice his TVP is a tier 10. I do not have one. There's a dash. He has 68% win rate. The Czechoslovakian, tier 10, great tank. Tier 9, Skoda T50. I also do not have one. He's got one, 62.31%. That's a Tier 9 Czechoslovakian medium tank. Let's look for the Tier 8. Now, this is where Tier 8 begins. You got Japanese, Chinese, Britain, France, United States, Germany, Russia. Where's Czechoslovakia? You don't see a Tier 8 Czechoslovakian tank. I don't have one. He doesn't have one. How did he get to Tier 9 Czechoslovakian medium tank if he never owned the Tier 8? Now let's look at Tier 7. Tier 7 is the Constructa T34-100. You'll notice it says 5 battles for me. I just got mine. He has 0 battles. How did he get the tier 9 and the tier 10 if he never had the tier 7? So now we'll look for the tier 6. There's 2 tier 6, the Skoda T25 and the Skoda T40. Is the T20, one of them is a premium tank, and one of them is not. Which one is the premium tank? 3815. I'm going to say that the T40 is probably the premium tank. So he has the tier 6. Now at tier 5, the T24, he has none. He never owned one. He skipped tier 4 on the Czechoslovakian medium. So let's look at tier 3. Oh, he might have done, okay, and now here, I guess this is a light tank? Oh, it says it's a medium, the STV-39. He never owned one. He skipped that. Look for the next Czechoslovakian is tier 3. He never owned one. He skipped it. Tier 2, he skipped. And tier 1, I do not see for either of us, which means we both skipped tier 1. So this player, the number 1 player on the North America server by WN8, has the tier 10 and tier 9 Czechoslovakian medium tanks, but he skipped the 8, the 7, and maybe the 5, the 4, the 3, the 2, and the 1. So he skipped 7 out of 10 tiers on that medium line. That's a sign of someone who has stats that are padded. And it doesn't mean that he did it because he wanted to pad stats. You know, I skip tanks here and there. But people who do stat padding use this as a technique to make it look like their scores are amazingly higher. Because the WN8 is an average, right? And the win rate is an average, and the performance rating and the efficiency rate, they're all averages. But his don't include none of the lower tiers. He's only getting, he's comparing his 9 and 10 tier tanks against me. I haven't even made it to tier 7. I'm in tier 7. He's comparing his 9 and 10 tier tanks to me playing 1 through 7. And he's going to have a higher WN8 because he's playing higher tiers, and I'm going to have a lower one because I'm playing lower tiers. That doesn't make him a better player. And I'm going to reinforce this. I am not attacking this guy. I'm just saying that there's suspicious behaviors with people who have high WN8s. There's suspicious things going on. And it's like I said, they have every right to do it, and he might not be doing it to pad the stats, but don't assume that someone who has a high WN8 is a good player. It's just not true. Now this is the number 1 player on the North America server compared to me, number 1 by WN8. And I'm going to show you another example of suspicious things that occur with people who have high WN8s and things like that. If you look at his British tank, the Conqueror, which I do not have yet, tier 9, heavy tank. So we're going to look at tier 9 British, and we're going to scroll over here. These are the tier 8s. The tier 8 is a Carnarvon. I have 63 battles. He has 0. He never even purchased the tank. He skipped over the Carnarvon. Totally skipped the tank. And that it's not a tank with a good reputation, which is probably why he skipped over it. It has a bad reputation. He did play the Black Prince. It took me 49 games to advance through it. He did it in 27. How did he advance through in half the time? You know, it's possible that maybe he was able to do it in half the time. I don't know. But he skipped over a tier 8 heavy tank, and this is the type of thing that is common. Most players just don't do that. And again, I'm not attacking this guy. I'm just saying that people with high WN8s have suspicious behaviors in their accounts. They skip tanks that they know are bad, and they skip low tier tanks, and it pads their WN8, and they're not better players.